gamers! Have you ever wondered what you would get if you combined Doritos, Mountain Dew, the Illuminati, and the Elder Scrolls Online, plus listening to My Hope Will Never Die for 4 hours straight on repeat? Well, you would get the Doritomancer, aka the Arcanist, aka the 7th new class for the Elder Scrolls Online! 7th playable class, my mistake. Listen, if you don't want to deal with me anymore, there are timestamps in the description if you want to go ahead, skip ahead, or you want to come back to the video at any point. Also, I have a Discord. The link is in the description, and we would love to have you, so that way we can send memes back and forth. Yes. Good! Welcome, gamers! Today, we're going to be going over my Bowcanist build for the Necrom DLC. This build is very, very simple, so that way you can get a good handle on how the Arcanist is supposed to be played. At the same time, it is very, very effective and hurts people real good, and it's a lot of fun to play. It do take some getting used to when it comes to playing this build, since this is the brand new class and all that stuff, but I did my best to explain everything that I have learned, and what I can say so far is that this build is not going to play itself. You do have to aim your abilities, and you do have to be mindful of the kind of combos and things that you're doing with your abilities, so that way you don't run out of resources, and that way you can time things up properly, because it can be a bit of a hassle to line things up again, and sometimes you really don't have that kind of time, especially when you're fighting multiple people at once. So that is why I give it a 4 out of 5 stars for its approachability rating. Other than that, once you've settled into the build and how it works, and you understand it, this can be very rewarding to play, and it is a lot of fun. I don't think I've played any other class since the release of Necrom, so that can tell you how much fun it is to play this build. And yes, I do have a montage for you guys, and it is very, very gamer, as this is like the most MLG themed class of all time. I mean, you literally have Mountain Dew beams, you throw Doritos at people, and the Illuminati circles you at all times, okay? There are literally eyes coming out of the sky with orbital VSATs, and listen, it is very MLG, and it is very, very gamer, okay? So grab yourself some Doritos, and get yourself a drink of Mountain Dew, and I hope you enjoy this montage. Yes. taking a look at our attributes, we have 0 points into magic, 16 points into health, and 48 points into stamina. And for the nerds that care, here are the stats of our bars. And obviously, these numbers get much, much higher while in combat. For our race on this build, I am a Khajiit for the passives that we get. Those being Robustness, increasing all of our recoveries, Lunar Blessings, increasing all of our max stats, and Feline Ambush, increasing our critical damage and healing by 12% and making us a hide-and-seek pro. We're pushing for quite a bit of critical damage on this spec, so this is the only race I could really recommend that would work. For our Mundus Stone, we are using the Shadow. Like I mentioned with our race, we are pushing for a lot of crit damage on this build, so having the Shadow does help push that even further, so that way we can hit them big fat numbers whenever we're trying to kill people, and then we kill them real good because we crit a lot. Okay, so Shadow. On this build, we are Vampire Stage 3. Pretend that says Stage 3, okay. We are Stage 3 for the passive Undeath, which we only get if we are Vampire Stage 3, which reduces our damage taken up to 30% based off our missing health. Vampire, non-negotiable on this build. For our consumables, we are using Jewels of Misrule. This will give us a boost to our maximum health and recovery for both our magic and stamina. Since Arcanist is an extremely hybrid-focused class, this is like the only food you should ever be using on this class. So if you can afford it, also go ahead and use Orzorga Smoked Bear Haunch, but obviously it's pretty expensive, so Jewels of Misrule will work just fine. For our potions, we are using the Essence of Health Potion, or the Tri-Stat Potion. This will give us all of our resources back when we use it, and all of the major recoveries for each of those resources, so that way we can get some extra recoveries. This is made with 1 Bug Loss, 1 Columbine, and 1 Mountain Flower. And yes, we are using double dot poisons on this build. Alright, you gamers, for the gear, on our front bar, we have a Deadly Bow. This is sharpened, and if you don't know what Deadly does, basically, if you're going to be using, well, Arcanist at all with Beam, Deadly is like the best in slot set for this. I've tested a bunch of other things. Deadly performs the best, so we have Deadly on the front, as it gives us a 15% damage boost to basically everything we do. On our back bar, we have the Vegetarian's Ice Staff. It is defending with a weapon damage enchantment. If you don't know what this does, listen, look at it. You see that? One of our skills is slightly better with this on, okay? Like, listen. On our head, we have Molekina's Mask with a Tri-Stat enchantment. This is Divines. This is here for the 1 piece of weapon and spell damage that it gives to us. You could swap this out for a 1-piece Magma on the head in medium, but I like the extra damage. Sustain might be hard for some of you, so just keep in mind you could put a, For our chest, we have the Cuirass of Wretched Vitality. That means it's heavy with a Tri-Stat enchantment. This is reinforced. Our second set is Wretched Vitality. A lot of Arcanist abilities are very expensive, but fortunately for us, our passives allow us to stack recoveries very easily. So having Wretched on there really does make it so we don't run out of resources super easily. But, you'll still find sustain issues, Wretched definitely helps. For our shoulders, we have Arm Cops of Wretched Vitality with a Tri-Stat enchantment. These are well fitted. For our belt, we have a Deadly Belt with a Tri-Stat enchantment. These are well fitted. For our hands, we have Bracers of Wretched Vitality with a Tri-Stat enchantment. These are well fitted. For our legs, we have Guards of Wretched Vitality with a Tri-Stat enchantment. These are Divines. For our feet, we have Boots of Wretched Vitality with a Tri-Stat enchantment. These are well fitted. For our neck, we have a Deadly Necklace with a weapon damage enchantment. It is infused. For our first ring, we have the Deadly Ring with a weapon damage enchantment. This is infused. And currently, for our second ring, I am using the Marken Ring of Majesty at the moment. It is swift with a weapon damage enchantment. If I could, I would be using Death Dealer's Feet, as this definitely helps us with our resource problem and also gives us fatter damage shields when we need them. But the problem with Death Dealer's Feet at the moment is whenever you go into like a PvP instance, for some reason the stacks, they just don't work. So like if you die or something, I don't know how it happens exactly, but you're just not gaining stacks half the time this is equipped. So I just put Marken on in its place, and hopefully ZeniMax can fix this, because imagine not having access to a 1-piece mythic item at all. That's crazy, isn't it? Quick side note, if you really wanted to be super min-max meta build of all time, you could just make a Wretched Vitality belt light instead of having a Deadly belt, and put some medium gloves of Deadly on here instead. but I had a deadly belt in the bank, and I also had golden wretched vitality gloves in the bank, so I just, you know, put these on here. But for min-max purposes and getting the extra % bonus out of the Undaunted passive, you can have a light belt of wretched vitality here and deadly bracers on the hands. If listen, you care that much about being slightly better than everyone else. For our skills on our front bar, for our first ability, we have Exhausting Fate Carver. This is the thing that they really want you to use to push for a lot of damage on Arcanist, and we are using it because it does do a lot of damage on Arcanist. This is where you dump all of your crux if you're going for your big fat combo, and this, when it does crit, hits insanely hard. I've seen the individual ticks of this beam hit for up to 6k sometimes, and that's every half second, so it do go pretty hard. But it is a bit difficult to use since you do have to aim it and it's not targeted. The area is not super generous, and you'll find a lot of the time you have to lead in a very exaggerated manner in order to hit your target because, you know, I don't know, lag, desync or whatever, but it takes some getting used to. But definitely when you are able to land it and you do end up stunning your opponent and rooting them with our other abilities, this is what is probably going to end up getting you most of the damage that you'll be doing and the most kills. For our next ability, we have Camouflage Hunter. This is here because while it is slotted, it gives us a bunch of fancy things like increased critical chance, minor berserk whenever we hit someone from behind, and access to the Slayer passive, which doesn't hurt because it gives us additional 3% damage for each ability slotted. It can pull Nightblades and stuff out of stealth, which is very useful since, like, nothing else we have on here can, and yeah. For our next ability, we have Cephalarch's Flail. This ability is weird and it's very difficult to explain, but basically we use this as our offensive setup ability, or you can kind of use this as a pseudo execute spammable. It can do a lot of damage. I've seen it hit for 12k before on a crit on a person that was very low on health, which is pretty impressive, but apart from that, you just use this to be debuffing your opponent and immobilizing them, so that way you can land your beam. Yeah, this in combination with one of our other abilities allows us to completely stam check our opponent, so they just, like, never have any resources, so we can guarantee the hit on our beam. For our next ability, we have Writhing Runeblades. This is our spammable, and it generates crux for us whenever we use it. We're using this to build up into our big beam combo, and also, you know, it doesn't hurt the fact that it gets increased critical chance the more crux you have active, so while you're building it, you can hit harder, basically. For our next ability, we have Rune of the Colorless Pool. This is our main CC. This is what we use to root people in place, lock them down. It can be blocked, but it cannot be dodged, and I'll talk about how we use this in the combat stuff section. But basically, whenever we do hit someone with this, they are paralyzed, so that means their character just kind of freezes. It applies minor vulnerability to them, so they take 5% more damage from us, and it applies minor brittle to them as well, so our critical damage is raised even higher on that target that we hit with this. And yeah, I didn't pick the charm. I know a lot of people like to use the charm, but the charm is really weird because it keeps the movement speed of the person that you fear, and I like locking people down in place and not having them move all over the place so I can guarantee my damage, and that's why I picked this one over the charm. The charm is good for other things, but listen, on this specific build, Rune of the Colorless Pool is just much better. For our ultimate on our front bar, we have the Tide King's Gaze. This ultimate is insane, and it's also insanely weird. Basically, you have an orbital strike that you can just summon on somebody, and it makes an attempt at following them, but you really need to constantly CC them and root them and stun them in order to guarantee that this lands, because anyone with like 5% movement speed can outrun this beam, so yeah. But when it does land, and you can combine it with everything else in the combo, you will find that people are not walking away from you whatsoever. And yeah, this is an insane ultimate. On our back bar, we have Recuperative Trees. They really had a fun time naming these abilities. Basically what this does is it's like a delayed burst on all of our Arcanist abilities, and whenever we do have that pulse of damage with our Arcanist abilities, we restore magic and stamina, and also we generate crux if we don't have any. This is also our damage buff, because while it's slotted on any bar, we just get major sorcery and major brutality at all times, so, you know, yeah, we need this on the build. For our next ability, we have Evolving Runemail. This is our heal over time / second burst heal or whatever. Listen, it's a weird ability. Basically, you cast this and it heals you 3 times and then an additional amount of health over 6 seconds. And it generates crux when you use it. And I'll explain how we use this to survive a little bit more when we get to the combat stuff section. But you need this on here. And yes, good. For our next ability, we have Impervious Rune Ward. This is our stop killing me button, okay? So we press this, and then we get a fat damage shield. And if we have Crux when we cast this, we also get a burst heal on top of that. So we're usually dumping all of our Crux if we need to play defensive into this, so that way we don't die. This is an insane ability, especially for survivability, and you need this on the build. For our next ability, we have Elemental Susceptibility, okay? This applies each of the status effects every 7.5 seconds, and also afflicts them with Major Breach, so that way they take more damage from us. Just a great debuffing tool overall. Next, we have Crux Weaver Armor. This is our armor buff. Armor buff, self-explanatory. We take less damage, and enemies that hit us are afflicted with Minor Breach, so that means they take a little bit more damage from us. And yeah, whenever we take damage, we also generate Crux every 5 seconds. For our backbar ultimate, we have Sanctum of the Abyssal Sea. This is our defensive ultimate, and it's really insane and wacky and weird, and basically, it gives us 60% damage mitigation, and if they somehow manage to destroy the shield, or, you know, the 10 seconds runs out, all the damage that we take is dispersed within 5 meters around us over 10 seconds, so this turns into a dot from all the damage that you take. Basically, when this is active, you're very hard to kill, but you can still die, so it's like corrosive armor, but just defense, and then it does have damage. Listen, like I said, it's weird, okay? And look at this. Make sure you fill out your passives. Okay, look. Taking a look at our champion points, in the role player tree, we have Meticulous Disassembly, Master Gatherer, Plentiful Harvest, and Steed's Blessing. In the sweaty tree, we have Duelist Rebuff, Biting Finesse, Biting Aura, and Thaumaturge. In the potato tree, we have Celerity, Survival Instincts, Pain's Refuge, and Sustained by Suffering. And only put 10 points into this, so that way you can get more mileage out of all, well, your slotted passives, okay? Listen. And make sure you fill out all the little golden stars, but always be aiming for these big slottable passives. Welcome to the Combat Stuff section. If you have no idea what a Combat Stuff section is, then you are new here and you have to subscribe. Okay, I don't make the rules. But second, it is where we go to look at the rotation, how to play the build, and how to survive, how to get kills, and all the other little tips and tricks that you need to know in order to play this build at a successful level, okay? And yeah. So before we get started with all the fun combat stuffs, I want to talk about the Arcanist itself, since it is the brand new class, and the playstyle surrounding it, since it is very different from most of the other classes in the game. And yeah, so what you need to understand about Arcanist is that it is a medium range class, meaning you don't want to be super close to your opponent and you don't want to be super far away from your opponent. You want to be in just the right spot in order to deal as much damage as you can, because if you're too close to your target, your abilities have to be aimed, and it's really hard to aim your abilities if you're right on top of your target. And if you're too far away from your target, well, obviously your abilities aren't going to hit. So finding that sweet spot is very essential to being as effective as you can be on Arcanist. And also another thing about Arcanist, it is not the fastest class in the game, but it's also not the slowest class in the game like Necromancer. It takes a little bit of getting used to the speed that you have to play this class at in order to be very effective, but it just takes some time to line up your combo and line everything up. And most of the time when you are going for your big beam combo, you'll find some dingus just runs up and interrupts you, or someone is trying to CC break and they just continue bashing after they CC break, and it's even an accident, but they still interrupt you. It's just, it can be very slow to play at times, and you know, the only times you'll really be playing super fast are when you're trying not to die. So yeah, just keep those things in mind when you're trying to play Arcanist. Other than that, Arcanist is pretty straightforward in how it's meant to be played. It's a very accessible class, so I'd say just about anyone can pick it up and figure out how it works. So I guess that means let's look at the rotation. So for the rotation on Arcanist, it's all about the brand new minigame, the Crux minigame of building up your Crux and then finding a way to spend it, okay? It's super revolutionary and we never saw it before on Dragonite or Nightblade, but listen, besides the point. But basically what we're doing the entire time we're in combat is we're trying to generate Crux, so that way we can empower certain abilities, so that way we can get more use out of them, since that is the whole name of the game with Arcanist. And what that looks like in practice is when we're going for our offensive rotation, we're going to start by buffing up, obviously. Then what we're going to do is, after we're buffed up and everything is going, we're going to be on our back bar with our Ice Staff. We are going to light attack, Elemental Susceptibility. Then we are going to switch to our front bar, and then we are going to light attack Rune Blades. Then we're going to light attack Rune Blades again, and then we're going to light attack Cephalarch's Flail, so that way we can debuff our target, and by this point, all those abilities should have generated us 3 Crux. Then what we're going to do is, once they are hit with the Tentacle, they should be immobilized, and people's first instinct after they get immobilized is to roll dodge. So we're going to take advantage of our Rune of the Colorless Pool, which can be blocked but not dodged, and when they go for the roll dodge to remove the immobilization from them, we're going to hit them with our Rune of the Colorless Pool, so then they'll get stunned by it. And then what we do once they're stunned is we go straight into our beam, and then we just hit them as many times as we can while they're just sitting there stunned. And yeah, you just kind of repeat this process over and over again until you kill your opponent. If they do get low enough on health, you do have the ability to just spam the tentacle, since it does function as like a pseudo execute. I've seen it hit for like 12k before. It can hit really hard, but most of the time you'll be building for your beam and trying to snare your opponent and lock them down in one place, so that way you can guarantee all of that damage. And of course, whenever you're dealing with really tanky targets or people that just don't want to move, or you see like a giant group of people that you think you can get a multi-kill on, don't be afraid to use the Tide King's Gaze in order to get those kills, because, you know, sometimes you're going to need a little bit of added pressure, and that is what that ultimate is there for. Since it relates to our offensive combo, I do want to mention the fact that you have to aim both your beam and your tentacle, and most of the time you'll see some very suspicious hitboxes where you're like, I am definitely hitting that guy, but he's not taking any damage from my abilities, and you just won't know what's happening. You do have to lead very heavily and dramatically in front of your target in order to make these abilities land, and sometimes it just reminds me of how Dawnbreaker just doesn't work sometimes. It's really weird, but the best thing I could say, if you want to be more consistent about getting things to land, is you do have to lead your shots, basically. Like a first-person shooter or whatever, you do have to lead very far. And that's really it about how to play offensive with it. It's got a really simple and set-in-stone rotation. I mean, you can mix it up, obviously. You can just spam Tentacle to build stacks, but if you really want to hit hard, you need to be using your Rune Blades as your spammable. And then once you have an opening, go and use your beam. You should be keeping the Immobilize and the CC on your opponent with both your Tentacle and your Colorless Pool on your target as much as you possibly can, so that way they are constantly drained of stamina, so that way you can land your beam. And yeah, just make sure you're cycling those in and out as often as you can, and don't be afraid to spam the tentacle a little bit. As for staying alive on Arcanist, it is pretty straightforward, but it is a bit different than most classes because you rely on damage shields and like some sort of heal. Listen, it's a weird combination, okay? But basically, whenever you're taking damage, right, the most straightforward and simple thing to do at the beginning is to just spam the heck out of roll dodge. Roll dodging is your best friend on this build since we are a Bowcanist and we are trying to stay far enough away from people. Rolling will not only move us pretty quickly, but it will also allow us to dodge damage, okay? And if you don't take damage, well, that, in my opinion, is the best way to mitigate damage, is to just not take it. So, obviously, spam roll dodge. And when it does come time for you to actually heal yourself and stay alive, because either you just can't roll dodge anymore or whatever, what we are going to do is we are going to start spamming our rune meld while we're trying to roll dodge. So we're roll canceling our rune meld while we're casting this. Not only are we getting our heal from it, but we are also generating crux. And what we're going to do with that crux is we are going to dump it into our big old rune spite ward, so that way we can get a big fat damage shield and a big fat burst heal as well. If you do end up running out of stamina, it's okay to just start spamming the rune spite ward, since when you first cast it, you'll get a massive damage shield for like 1 second. You just spam that over and over and over again until you have enough stamina to recast your rune meld, and be weaving your roll dodges in between, but do be mindful of how many roll dodges you're doing, because you don't want to actually just kill yourself because you drained all of your resources because you spam roll dodge too much. Okay, so combine this with line of sight and you should be very, very okay. And when it's time to go offensive, or you're like, I don't know when I'm gonna have my opening, if you have your gibbering shield available, which is your backbar ultimate, the Sanctum of the Abyssal Sea thing, that is what you're going to use. You're going to use that either so you can take a bunch of damage while going offensive, because you get 60% damage mitigation, or you're like really low health and you're still trying to turn things around. Go ahead and use that so that way you can survive. And yeah, basically you use that if you're ready to go offensive or you just actually need it. So that is basically how you play defensive. Just use a lot of roll dodges, stay far away from your opponent, And yep. And yeah, overall Arcanist is not very difficult to play. It only asks that you learn a few things in order to play it very effectively, but once you've picked up on them, this class is very fun to play, and especially this build. It is a bit simple, I will say, but I mean, when you're building for beam and you're building for damage and you're just trying to learn the class as a whole, you might want to have a more simplified build, so that way you can understand how the class is supposed to work and the mechanics behind it, so that way in the future you can goof off in different ways, because it's nice to finally have some new way to approach combat in this game instead of just having a new proc set or a new item set or a new mythic item or whatever other thing that they're trying to add. And now they're adding new ways to actually play the combat in this game, and it's very refreshing, and I think that's why I'm enjoying Arcanist a lot right now, is because it's finally something different and it's very fun to play. And like I said, it's not hard to learn how to play either. It does have its cheesy moments where you can just kind of infinitely steal people's stamina by locking them down with your tentacle and immobilizing them, and then when they try and roll out of it, you just stun them. So not only do they have to roll, but they have to CC break, and then they'll probably roll again, and then they won't have any stamina, and it will be very sad for them, because then they'll eat your giant beam, and then they'll die, and it's kind of funny. Overall, yeah, Arcanist is pretty fun. It's not the best class in the world. It's not like, you know, top tier for damage and all that stuff, especially for PvP, but it's definitely different. It's definitely unique, and it's a lot of fun to play, and I recommend you give this build a try if you can, and hopefully you learn something from this combat stuff section. And yeah, gamers, I really do enjoy playing Arcanist, if you couldn't tell yet. This is a very, very fun class, and I do like its introduction into this game. It does spice things up a little bit. There are some aspects of this class that are very cheesy, very, very strong. There are other aspects I think could use a little bit of work, but overall, I'm very happy with the state of the Arcanist in the Elder Scrolls Online, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as I do. If you're still watching the video by this point, then that means you like the video, and therefore you have to subscribe. Listen, I don't make the rules, alright? If you think I make the rules, then you're thinking wrong, okay? So you have to subscribe, and you have to like the video, and you have to join the Discord! I have a Discord, link is in the description. We'd love to have you. But yeah, if you have any questions about the build or anything that I might change in the future, don't hesitate to put it in the description, and you can also join the Discord and ask me there, and that is perfectly fine. And yeah, I don't have much else to say. Okay, have a good night.